there was no country where it was more dangerous to be a communist than Soviet Union. One of the biggest horrors in human history, which is the period of the Great Terror, is 1934. So what happens in 1934 is that in Leningrad, former Petersburg, or Petrograd, Sergei Kirov, who was the party secretary in Leningrad, is assassinated. Now, Kirov was one of the very, very few people that Stalin would call a friend. There are many conspiracy theories about who assassinated Kirov. Many people say it was Stalin behind it. I think this is not the case. Stalin was genuinely appreciated Kirov. They were genuinely good friends. Actually, Kirov is assassinated by a random guy with whom he had beef. Some people think Kirov wanted to sleep with his wife. But anyway, it was more like a personal beef between the assassin and Kirov himself. But the assassination of Kirov opens the floodgates of paranoia and of persecutions that would go on for years. Stalin immediately goes to Leningrad, and very soon, although it's clear who the killer is, he signs a decree, he signs a law that basically says summary trials and executions for people who are suspected for terrorism. So terrorism now becomes the big thing. Previously, it was things like sabotage. So if the state wanted to eliminate you, they would say you're a saboteur. Now we have the idea of terrorism. And the idea was, if you are against the party, objectively, you want to eliminate the party leadership, which is what happened with the case of Kirov. Therefore, you're morally responsible for terrorism. So your ideas are morally responsible for crimes. So Stalin, immediately after the murder of his friend Kirov, signs this law. Soon there are more laws being signed, which says that basically the secret police can arrest you without any procedure. And we have the floodgates being open. So although it's clear who killed Kirov, and it was a lone shooter, a lone murderer, a lone assassin, as we'd say today, only for the case of Kirov, 6,500 people end up persecuted and executed. And this was only the beginning. In the next years, and particularly in 37 and 38, Stalin releases the Great Terror, which means many key party members and people with whom Stalin had beef, like Kamenev, Zinoviev, or Bukharin, these were key Bolsheviks, but he had beef with them from the past, and he would link them to different supposed plots as being allies of the Nazis, who were already in power in Germany, as being spies of imperialism. And then you would arrest, let's say, 5 people. Then you would arrest everyone around them. And then you would torture them. Everyone knew that the accusations were made up. But made up accusations means you can be creative with them. It means, for example, that I arrest you and I torture you to sign that you are a spy of Nazis, of fascism, and of imperialism, and you work with these 10 other people. Then I arrest these 10 other people, and then I torture each one of them, and they give me 100 other names. So it's like a geometrical progress of arresting and torturing people for no evident reason. And notice that this is also a time where torture is legal. Stalin openly talks, puts on the table, we're going to use power on these people. He means physical torture, and physical torture is officially the line and officially a policy. Then these people, completely broken, are brought to the show trials, to public trials. These were trials that were taking place literally in theaters, cinemas, because there were audiences outside. They were screaming protesters wanting their heads. And these people were completely broken from the torture and for threats of their family. So the idea was, we're going to give you a script, you're going to play by this script, and maybe we're going to let you leave. Most of the times they wouldn't let them leave, or we're going to let your family leave. And we see the weird spectacle, people in these show trials accusing themselves, saying, look, I was a pig, I was an imperialist jackal. There is no way for me to atone for the crimes I've done. Or we see the weird spectacle of the public prosecutor speaking like a hooligan and like a thug and using curse words against the defendants, and the defendants also applauding the guy who was telling what a pieces of horrible people they were. So in this time we have this absolute period of madness. In some way, there was no country where it was more dangerous to be a communist than Soviet Union, because the vast majority of the leadership of the Bolsheviks, the vast majority of the leadership of the army, we're talking about 90% of high army officials, are being persecuted and are being liquidated. And also we have the disgusting spectacle also of collective responsibility, which means if you actually admit with the made up scripts that you are an enemy of the people, then also we're going to go after your wife and sometimes also your kids, even though we promise you that we will spare your family. So again, collective responsibility is official party policy. So how many people perished during that time? There were more than 1 million arrests. Official deaths in terms of execution is around 600,000, but we also need to add the people who perished during torture or who disappeared. So we go to something like 800,000 people. Put into perspective, the whole death toll of the Spanish Civil War was 500,000 people. And at the same time in Soviet Union, we have 800,000 people only from this internal purge. And you would ask again, how is it that so many people were purged? And again, the answer is because each person would have to give a list of how many people he knew. Therefore, if you're an enemy of the people and you name someone else, they were accomplices. But also, if you were arrested and your friend was not arrested, but didn't tell to the police that you're an enemy of the people, it could be that he's an accomplice. For example, let's say Razi is arrested and he names after torture that Michael and Daniel are enemy of the people. He doesn't name me, but the secret police knows I'm a friend of Razi, and they come to me and say, look, Razi is an enemy of the people, but you didn't tell us. Therefore, you're also an enemy of the people. So here you come. And in some places in the countryside, there were even quotas. So the local secret police needed to arrest 50 people. And we had some crazy stories, like the secret police bursting into party meetings and arresting random people, whoever was there, because they had to fulfill a quota. So this is how we end up with this ridiculous amount of people being arrested. So during that time, according to the best numbers that we can have, 1 in 170 people perished in the purges. 1 in 170, not the 1 in 170 of adult people, 1 in 170 of everyone was persecuted. And my question is, why? Why did Stalin have to do the Great Terror? I understand why he had to do the forced collectivization. Within the context of a communist, this makes sense. So there are things that are evil, but within the context of evil, they make sense. For example, the Holocaust is an ultimate evil, an unbelievable evil. And yet it makes sense within the context of being a Nazi and an anti-Semite. Hitler says, I want to eliminate the Jews, I will do it. But the Great Purge makes no sense to me. Stalin had already consolidated his power. Stalin had no reason to go after the vast majority of the heroes of the revolution and present them as spies. And Stalin was already in the process of being the undisputed leader and of building socialism in Soviet Union. This is why it's one of the periods in human history that is of the most interest to me. Because it's not the banality of evil, it is the, how to put it, the fact that evil makes here no sense. Even within the context of communism, even within the context of collectivism, the period of the Great Purges, the period of the Great Terror makes no sense to me.
Guys, and whoever's out there who's Republican and conservative, I got to tell you, rejecting the Enlightenment is not a winning strategy. So stop.